Hey, it's Matt, your average gamer, and for today's video, we're going to be covering the 5 best mage builds I've ever done. And to start, we're going to start with Comet Azur, which is incredibly powerful. Anyone that's used Comet Azur knows the sheer power it has. It's probably one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful spell in the game. It can wipe bosses off the map entirely, and with simple buffs like Terra Magica and Golden Vow, it can do even more damage. Comet Azur is awesome and should be the staple in late game for almost all mages, given the fact that it's ridiculously powerful. And if you're having difficulty with any particular boss and you're a mage, definitely go the Comet Azur route and it's going to make it a lot easier. As long as you learn how to set it up, which has a little bit of a learning curve, it does crazy amounts of damage and can literally obliterate bosses. Comet Azur makes the game a lot easier. It's a fantastic spell. It's incredibly powerful, as we mentioned, and as long as you invest heavily in intelligence, you're going to get a lot of damage out of it. Even if you just meet its minimum requirement of 60 intelligence, you're still going to do massive damage. Now let's get into equipment. For the equipment that I use on my Comet Azur setup, I have Lucette's Glintstone Staff plus 10, the Jellyfish Shield, Azur's Glintstone Crown will boost it by 8%, Graven Mask Talisman, Graven School Talisman, Ritual Swords Talisman, Magic Scorpion Charm, and then of course the Magic tier, along with the Infinite FP tier, which is a staple for Comet Azur builds. It's something that you absolutely want to have, that Infinite FP tier, so that you can keep the beam going as long as you want. And now let's get into stats for this build. Now for stats, for my mage characters at level 200, because we're on journey 10 or 11 at this point, but generally speaking, you just want to make sure you have 60 intelligence and everything else is going to be up to you. Yeah, it's a hefty requirement on Comet Azur, given the fact that you need 60 intelligence just to use it, but the good thing about it is once you hit that 60, it's basically already soft capped, and then it hard caps at 80, so if you keep leveling up, you can get to 80 intelligence. If not, 60 intelligence will give you comparable damage. And then next up we have is the Darkmoon Greatsword. Darkmoon Greatsword isn't the most overpowered weapon in the game, but it's one of the most reliable, doing magic damage, a little bit of frost buildup, and then the stance damage at a distance makes it one of the best weapons you can use as a mage. The Darkmoon Greatsword is also really FP cost friendly too. For the amount of damage it does, once you charge it up, you can use the beams for a full minute, and it really doesn't cost a lot of FP for the amount of damage you're getting out of it. You see the damage here, by the way. The damage is very good, and it's one of the most reliable weapons to use as a mage as well, which obviously is one of the reasons why it was included on this list. The Darkmoon Greatsword is fantastic. Now let's get into equipment. For this awesome setup, we have the Darkmoon Greatsword plus 10. Any staff in the offhand for spells is fine. Any seal will do. The Spellblade set will boost this. We have the Dragoncrest Great Shield Talisman, Godfrey Icon, Shard of Alexander, Magic Scorpion Charm. Then we have the Magic tier. You can throw in the Faith tier as well if you want to do some buffs. Now let's get into stats. Now you're going to see something similar here with my mage. I think I only respec for 1 or 2 of these, and the majority of these it was basically the same stats and same setup, but generally speaking you're going to need like the minimum strength requirements, and they can go really high into intelligence again because the weapon art scales very much with intelligence, so get that to 60 or 80 and you're going to do very good damage with this weapon. The Darkmoon Greatsword is undeniably a fantastic weapon to use as a mage. Obviously that's why it was included. I hope you guys enjoyed that. It's a really fun one too. Next up we have Night Comet, one of my favorites, and it does ridiculous levels of damage. So all of these are in the description below, but the video that's attached for this that I did for Night Comet, I did an insane amount of buffs to it and it ended up doing ridiculous levels of damage. It's one of the best spells in the entire game, has incredible range too. It's absolutely fantastic. First did this one about 4 months ago or so, and I had a lot of good feedback on my channel for it and what I added to it and whatnot, because obviously the base damage is pretty good, but then we threw in a whole bunch of buffs on top of that and were able to obliterate some of the bosses in Elden Ring with ease. Now, Night Comet is fantastic on the Fire Giant because he has 0 magic resistance. By the way, a little bit of an honorable mention to Carrion Grandeur. I have a build for that on my channel, but that's a little more challenging to pull off. A lot of these are easier than that. This does fantastic damage to him. You're going to see here. We did a whole bunch of buffs added to it, but the range is what makes it so easy, and the fact that it's charged and can be boosted by the Godfrey Icon. Another great thing here is the 2 Staves of Loss. When you have 2 Staves of Loss before any additional buffs, you get 30% from both for a total of 60% boost to Night Comet, which is insane, giving it a huge base damage, and then you add buffs to it, and it becomes ridiculous as far as the amount of damage you can get on the majority of bosses in Elden Ring. When you're thinking of what to do for the late game, for the new game +7, for those later journeys, Night Comet is your friend, no doubt. It is one of those builds that you're going to be able to use on any journey to do massive levels of damage. You can buff it how you like. Even without the buffs, the base damage is crazy good. It's charged as well. Night Comet is ridiculously good. It's one of the best things to use in the game, and it's one of my favorite builds, if not my favorite, to use as a mage. Now let's get into equipment. Now for equipment, we have 2 Staves of Loss. You only need to upgrade the one that you're casting with, the Black Dumpling and the Mushroom Crown, Graven Mask Talisman, Godfrey Icon, Ritual Swords Talisman, Magic Scorpion Charm, and then we have the Magic tier and the Faith tier as well. Definitely be sure to check this one out in the description though if you want to see all the buffs, because there is a lot to this one, a lot we did with it. Change some talismans around, get even more damage out of it. Poison proc it as well. This one's a little bit complicated, I know, so definitely if you're looking forward to the Night Mage thing, check out that video that's in the description below. It'll explain how to buff it and get ridiculous levels of damage out of it. First stats, once again, heavily invested in intelligence. Like I said earlier, I didn't really move a lot of this stuff around. A lot of the stats were the same, but I did want to go over because they were the ones for each individual build. But my mage character is around level 200, and most of these it can do universally because, again, they're all based off the intelligence stat, whether it's the Ashes of War that scale purely with intelligence or magic itself. Next up, the Wing of Astel, one of my favorite weapons to use as a mage. The Wing of Astel's Ash of War Nebula is fantastic. It does additional damage to gravity type enemies. It's pretty much all magic damage, can be boosted by Terra Magica, and once again, investing heavily in intelligence, it can do massive damage. Wing of Astel is very user-friendly too, and the fact that it's very straightforward and easy to use. It's something I always recommend to people who are trying mage characters because of the fact that the weapon art scales very well with intelligence. You can continue to do your spells and whatnot while also using this as an awesome sidearm. Having that boost to gravity type enemies does help with certain bosses like Verdun as well, who takes additional damage to it, but it does fantastic damage to the majority of bosses in Elden Ring, and once again, it is incredibly easy to use. Now let's get into equipment. For this we have the Wing of Astel +10. Any seal and any staff will do. The Spellblade set will boost this. Anything that does magic damage it will boost. Ritual Swords Talisman, Magic Scorpion Charm, Shard of Alexander for the weapon art, Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman. Then we have the Magic tier. You can throw in the Faith tier for some additional buffs as well. If you want to save 10 levels, you can always use the Faith tier. That helps with that. And once again, it's pretty much the same stats here. It's something for me. I don't even go for a lot of vigor now because most of the bosses I'm destroying very quickly. But you can do this at 150 as well with the minimum dex requirements on the weapon. 60 intelligence. You'll do massive damage. It's one of the best weapons to use in the game as a mage. And this is one of the easiest weapons, like I said, to use as a mage. It's fantastic. It really is. If you haven't tried it, definitely try out the Wing of Astel. Ton of fun to use. Next up, Death's Poker, another favorite, does massive damage. This is a fun one. Death's Poker is an interesting weapon because it says it scales with a D for the weapon, but the truth is the weapon art actually scales much better, and the intelligence that you're going to put into your character, you'll be able to see as you get to 50 or 60 intelligence, you'll see it's still scaling up in damage, which really doesn't say D very much, it says more like a B, and the weapon art really does scale fantastically with intelligence, and it's primarily what you're going to be using with Death's Poker as well. Death's Poker, you're going to see in the video that's in the description if you check that one out, has 3 different things you can do with the weapon art, but for me, I like I'm on Xbox LT and then R1, which leaves a trail of frost and magic damage. Seems to build up massive damage. It's my favorite part of the weapon art. I think it's the most overpowered. If you're able to get that trail out, you destroy the majority of bosses in Elden Ring with ease. Now, Death's Poker has a little bit more of a learning curve than, say, Wing of Astel, but once you get it and you understand it, it's one of the best weapons to use as a mage in Elden Ring, does massive damage, can also be boosted by Terra Magica. It's fantastic to use this weapon art. Obviously, the frost buildup increases the damage, and then just continuing on that trail to do more damage. It's an excellent weapon to use as a mage. Now let's get into equipment. Now for equipment, any staff will do. We have Death's Poker +10. By the way, the Spellblade set will boost this. Any seal will do. We had the Sanguine Noble robe on. I know a few people have asked about that one. Dragon Crest Great Shield, Magic Scorpion Charm, Ritual Swords Talisman, Shard of Alexander, and then we have the Magic tier, and you can throw in the Faith tier if you want to add some buffs as well. Now for the stats and equipment I had here, basically the same setup. You can see the spells, that's why I put this up too, that I'm using with each individual one as well. You can also throw in a fire spell if you want to deproc and on-proc and reproc the frost. I know that was a lot, but yeah, if you want to deproc and reproc the frost, You can use like a fire spell or something like that as well. And for me, this was my setup. And once again, heavily invested in intelligence on this weapon. I'd recommend more vigor for most people, but overall, I really like the stats for a lot of these. Fantastic for damage. All of these are really good. These were the 5 best mage builds, by the way, that I've ever done in Elden Ring. I hope this helps you guys out, gives everybody a little bit of a library. We ended the weekend with the 5 best arcane builds, faith builds, and mage builds. This was a ton of fun. This is the 30th day of a build or build video, by the way, in a row. It's been absolutely crazy. So crazy that I actually lost my voice a little bit in this one, which you can probably tell throughout the entire video. But man, this was a lot of fun. Hopefully we get that news soon for DLC. In the meantime, definitely be sure to sub if you love overpowered PvE builds. There's a ton of awesome builds on my channel. Thanks for watching, everybody, and I will catch you guys there.